Okay, this is Joanna Nelson, and I'm the Strategic Programs Manager for the Economic Development Department for the state and the chair of the Sustainable Economy Task Force on behalf of our Secretary, Alicia Keys. And we're going to call this meeting to order for the Sustainable Economy Task Force meeting, August 17th, 9:30, 2022. And as a reminder to everybody, we are recording this. And for the Open Meetings Act, we do need to state your name when you're speaking and the organization that you represent. And we'll go ahead and call roll.
Right, Lucinda Saito. Secretary Moisey is excused. Elaine Perea. Leo Delgado. Steve Varick.
Present.
Secretary Trujillo.
She's on, Felicia. She said she had a message that she had another call.
Okay, James Pofiwa.
Good morning, I'm here.
Morning, James. Tom Cole. Charles Woolman. Anna Linden Weller is excused. Alyssa Latucci. Secretary Cordova.
And it's Deputy Yolanda here.
Hi, Yolanda. Amber Rodriguez. Patricia Trujillo. Dana Barr.
Present, thanks.
Hi, Dana. Secretary Clark. And Joanna Nelson.
Present.
That is everybody.
Great, great. Thanks, Felicia. And we'll be keeping an eye on the participants to see if anybody else joins, but it's great to see everybody. I hope everybody's having a good week. You received the agenda in your email, and I did post a couple of links in the chat. You can always find that agenda. You can find the previous meetings recording, as well as the minutes on our Sustainable Economy Task Force site within the EDD page. So that link is available. The item that we have up for approval that requires a vote is to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Is there any vote to make a motion to approve those minutes?
This is James Poviwa. I move to approve the minutes.
Thanks,
Yolanda, I'll
James.
second.
Great, thank you, Deputy. Okay, all of those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Wonderful, thanks. And again, those are located on the task force webpage. We're going to move on to the next item. That's item number 4 on the agenda. And we had up to discuss some updates from the Economic Development Department that hopefully are relevant to this group and its members in this work. So first up, item A is an update on the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This is a program that I have been providing some updates previously, and we have some exciting news. This, as a reminder, is a program from U.S. Treasury that is allocating around $70 million to come to New Mexico to provide credit enhancement to support small businesses and economic development within the state, with a special focus on supporting socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. And we received word from Treasury last week that we should be receiving the green light and to receive our first tranche, which is around $20 million for the next 3 years. And that should be coming to New Mexico within a week or two. So that's really exciting. This is months and months and months in the hopper, as Treasury has really worked really hard to get this program online. And I can get the board any information that is of interest. Really quick overview. The majority of money right now was proposed to go into setting up and funding VC and equity funds with a focus on supporting socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, supporting impact investment funds, as well as community-focused funds. We are signing a contract with our investment management firm, and that is a group called Avivar. And we also finalized the investment advisory committee, and that group is going to be put into place to be able to review the recommendations from the investment management firm, which then get passed to the cabinet secretary. And then we also will be hiring very soon. We've got the paperwork into SPO to hire a staff person at EDD to focus on managing the collateral assistance. Hi, Charles. The person that we will be hiring will be able to focus their time to manage the collateral assistance program, which is the other portion of funds, where the other portion of funds will be put. And that is a credit enhancement program. That's our current program that we run to help mitigate risk for businesses so they can make more loans and support more businesses. We have a technical assistance proposal that's due to Treasury in October. So we can give another update. And again, if you have any input, any feedback into that proposal, would be more than happy to follow up with you and collect your feedback on that. But that's exciting news. It's really a great advantage to the state of New Mexico and our small business, especially our ability to focus on socially and economically disadvantaged business owners. The next item that I wanted to give an update really quickly on is the Healthy Food Finance Initiative. This is coming through the governor's office to support access to healthy food, as well as supporting agricultural producers, farmers, and food systems in New Mexico. And this is a cross-agency collaboration. Many agencies that are represented on the task force are working on this and receive legislative funding. Our portion of that is to create a healthy food finance fund, a lot of F's in there. We are putting out an RFP hopefully within a week, and that RFP will be looking for a CDFI, a Certified Development Finance Institution, to be able to house the seed money that we receive from legislature to be able to create a grant and loan program to support food systems projects. Again, really exciting news regarding how are we supporting our small businesses, economic development, especially focusing on socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. We also hired a staff person that's coming on to EDD to be able to provide technical assistance in alignment with food systems projects and support. So they're coming on August 22nd, and they'll be representing our department in that cross-agency cohort. We would expect that fund that will be available for small businesses in food systems or community projects in food systems will hopefully be online by December, by early winter. The next item that we had was giving you a really brief update on our Economic Development Department, our JEDI office, the Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion office. We received legislative finance or allocation to be able to hire a staff person. So this office has hired a JEDI support staff. So that's really exciting. And this office is working closely with us, with EDD, obviously, and then as well with SEEK to keep up to date with the equity principles that the SEEK, the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council, is tasked with developing. Anybody have any questions or items for discussion regarding those updates from EDD? I'm very excited about all three of those things. So more than happy to talk about them offline if you have any questions, get you more information. I'm going to move on to item number 5, and that is the bulk probably of the meeting today is to discuss Hatchform, the company that was hired through a contract to look at how a number of things. They had quite a detailed scope of work, but they provided us recommendations on how SetForce can work with the SEEK. They gave us some recommendations on the type of work that we should focus on. They also provided us information on the protocol, some protocols that our two boards can use. So we are going to look at fiscal year 23 that's in front of us, we're in right now, and get some feedback, hopefully from the task force as we look at what are the major items that we are working on for the fiscal year to achieve our purpose for this work. I did send you, or we sent you, Hatchform's report, I guess you would call it. It was about 90 pages in a PDF, and let us know if you didn't get that and we can resend it. It was also presented in the SEEK. Did everybody get that and have a chance to review it? Maybe we're all really busy. Okay, great.
Did get it, yep.
Okay, and I'm going to share my screen. And basically what I have done and what we've done at EDD, along with talking with Vice Chair Poviwa, with James, who's the chair of SEEK, is we took the recommendations that Sean at Hatchform gave us, and we put this together. These are draft notes, but looking at the fiscal year up ahead and trying to figure out, okay, based on his recommendations, what's applicable, what's relevant, how do we take this and run with it? What are the deliverables and what is the scope that this group can work on? So would really love your input and feedback. Of course, during the meeting is great, but we can send this out afterward. And if you have follow-up questions, comments, would love those after the meeting as well. And Felicia and James, if you can help me, I know Sean said he was coming on at 10, but if he comes on, just let me know. I can't see the participants.
For sure.
All right, and I'm going to go over this. It's about 2 pages, and we've again taken his recommendations that he had parsed it out in a particular way, and we kind of took that as a great starting point and a foundation, and we're able to hone this so it makes sense for our team. I'm pulling this out, and I think it's always relevant to highlight the mission for this group and the purpose of this group. And one of those deliverables is developing a strategic plan to transition the state economy away from reliance on natural resource extraction and be updated for the next 5 years. As a reminder, we are using the EDD strategic plan that was published in October of 2021 as a starting point to use as the strategic plan that we can update every year for the next 5 years until 2027. We are required to report to a number of committees, legislative committees, and that would be set for the fall and no later than October 1st of every year. Our EDD leadership team did give an update on the plan during this upcoming legislative session that satisfied that requirement. However, as we're just now beginning this work on updating the plan, we will be required to make those presentations next summer. Some thoughts that we came up with, thinking out loud, how do we make this plan usable, that it's not setting on a shelf? As you know, one of the missions and focus of this group, as well as the SEEK, is to include voices that were previously unheard, to include communities that have been historically marginalized, include socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, their feedback in this group, make this as inclusive as a process as we can to gather the input of the state and those communities that are disproportionately impacted by negative issues within the economy. We recognize that a lot of people on our task force and extended stakeholders have extreme limited time and capacity for yet another task force or more work. So how do we actually create action knowing that we all have limited resources, limited time? And how do we make this a clear tie back to the deliverables that are identified in Senate Bill 112, which creates this task force and this work? As I mentioned, Hatchform was the contractor, and I highlighted the key deliverables that Sean was focused on. So I mentioned the Set Forth SEEK coordination. How do we work together? Protocols. I think it would be helpful. We can take those recommendations for the protocols and send that out to the group so we can review those. Also, developing an equity framework. Sean did a great job at laying out some recommendations and drafting up some guiding principles, as well as what would a sample equity assessment worksheet look like. And James, as I mentioned, the chair of the SEEK is on. He's the vice chair of this group, and we'll be giving an update later regarding the SEEK's work related to this effort. Also, Hatchform provided a report card framework, and this is something that Felicia will be able to speak to as well. So here's what we were able to parse out from this, and hopefully you got a chance to look at it. Sean identified three buckets or three sections, and we have taken those and played around a little bit with the titles and the working language around these three buckets, but and we added one, but we've parsed these out into phases. So if we look at this initial phase of assessment, and this was brought up on the last call, this initial assessment, we put out this strategic plan. What was the reach? And we have assessed currently where EDD is at with the strategic plan, checking in with our staff, and Felicia is going to provide an overview on that, and that is in process. But basically from that work, we'll be able to compile findings, we'll be able to review that and evaluate a report card of what has happened so far with the strategic action plan. And that will be presented probably at the next meeting to this group, and that'll be able to be reviewed and evaluated. The next phase that would be starting very soon is collecting input and engagement. This is really key. As I mentioned, the key focus of this group is to make sure that voices that typically go unheard, are very involved and engaged in the process. We did our best the first go around to to collect as much feedback as we could from stakeholders and community members. Not perfect whatsoever. And you better believe it that we heard from numerous groups that they were not contacted. We didn't talk to this person. So what are those gaps? And who are the groups that we need to make sure have a voice and a seat at the table this go around? How can we make improvements on the first time? And I bring this up quite often, but when we published our strategic plan the first time, we really struggled with getting feedback from tribal entities as well as tribal governments. We heard from a couple of tribal business owners. Pueblo of Acoma, for example, was very vocal to say, hey, nobody talked to us. So how do we do a better job this time, especially regarding collecting feedback from tribal entities? So part of the work that Sean's organization presented to us and recommendations is a strategy around community engagement. So he subcontracted with the Center for Civic Policy and Justice, and they provided a strategy which is in the later part of the report that Sean produced. And ideally, starting in September, we would be able to contract with an organization that would further develop that strategy and be able to deploy it to make sure that we are creating an engaging platform to provide feedback and insight into the strategic plan. What did we get wrong? What do we need to add? And this obviously falls very heavily on the SEEK too. So really opening up communication with Vice Chair Poviwa, with James, to make sure that the scope of work and that is approved and okayed by the SEEK before moving forward with that. Also, EDD would also continue the strategy that we deployed the first time. We do have an extensive network, being able to reach out to state agencies, economic development organizations, our economic development stakeholders. So we would be involved in that process and starting that up to get opportunities open for feedback. As well, within this second phase, this collecting input and engagement, it also gives us a chance to review the metrics that were put forth by the first contractor and figure out, are these the correct metrics that we want to utilize? Are they the right ones? Do we need to add ones to gauge if we're on track with this work? So this is definitely something that would be in front of this task force, probably early winter, late winter, maybe 2 meetings from now, that we would want your review on that. The fourth component of this phase is the website. One of the most important parts of this work is being able to communicate with our communities, with our state, with our stakeholders. Where are we at? Here's our report card, and here are the ways that you can align with and implement this work. And so the strategy around what information is conveyed on the website will be really important, and that definitely will get put in front of this group to be able to review and make comments and provide feedback on that. Currently, just as a reminder, our state plan website is eddstateplan.com. We'll put that in the chat. And hopefully this work would conclude around the beginning of 2023. Moving into the third phase, almost done, recognizing that we've got to have an updated strategic plan by June 30th. We would hope that information collection phase would be concluded by January, after the holidays and after the deepest part of winter. And we again, open for feedback, but we can start that process of looking at hiring or contracting with a firm to start the process to be able to be working hand in hand with the community engagement strategy, as well as EDD, as well as this group, to be compiling the feedback and those edits and those updates, actually writing the plan. And that's that first bullet here that you see. The second is we are responsible for giving presentations to legislative committees. So we do need to start that process as soon as possible. And of course, that's going to be dependent on what are the updates, what's the report card, and that would hopefully start at the beginning of 2023. I have here on the third item, provide data and information for the website. Hopeful that the contractor that is helping us with the compilation of information and data, obviously are going to help us compile that information, that data for the website. Equity principles framework, hopefully this, we're projecting that this would get done by the end of the year. Fifth item, develop policy recommendations. This is another deliverable for this task force, that from our work that we're able to develop policy recommendations for our legislators. And obviously that information, those recommendations would be guided by this task force working hand in hand with the SEEK. And then as well, another one of our deliverables is making sure our updated plan is in alignment with the strategic plan entitled the New Mexico Clean Energy Workforce Development Strategy or Study. And this is phase 3. Concluding, again, I should probably highlight this. We would want that updated strategic plan by June 30th and have our presentations, hopefully final drafts ready to go by the end of June. So we're ready to make those presentations and policy recommendations to those committees. The last and final phase would be alignment and implementation. This, again, open to feedback, but thinking about spring to summer, how are we enabling our communities and our stakeholders to align with and implement the strategic plan? How far does it go if EDD or this task force, the agencies represented in it, are utilizing the plan? We do receive questions from our communities, from our local governments. How do we make our strategic plan align with EDD? So we're working together. And hopefully we would develop an implementation strategy and deployment and be able to identify that. And these are some key components: community, business, state agencies. Again, how is this useful? This doesn't do anyone any good. We're not utilizing resources effectively if this plan sits on a shelf. So how do we create this engaging as possible? And I see some people are in the lobby and I'm not able to let them in if somebody is. And then this also is, how do we help our stakeholders as well implement the equity principles that will be developed by the SEEK and set force, and then providing metrics and tracking. This is also a key part of implementation as well. And those, again, will be in front of this group to get feedback on. So these are the 4 major phases that we have identified based on the recommendations from Hatchform. And then from these phases, we were also able to parse out a tentative budget that, and if you look at these main items, ideally a tentative brainstorming I'm not sure if these dollar amounts are enough, so I would love some feedback and guidance. But administrative assistance, this has come up that it would be great to have a specific person, contractor that's able to provide all of the scheduling, stenograph work, etc., calendar scheduling, especially as we get into setting up interviews, etc. Low amount, we can edit this. This was just a number thrown out. So number 2, the actual plan writing, the data compilation, developing the presentation materials based off of an estimate of what we entered into a contract with our first consultant that actually wrote the plan and engaged on that data collection, including primary and secondary data collection. So number 3, community engagement. This is the strategy, developing and deploying the strategy to engage with underserved communities. Website updates. This is taking that eddstateplan.com that I mentioned and actually doing the updates. We lucked out because we did receive a grant from the Economic Development Administration to engage this work, engage and deploy this work. So we have $75,000 that I believe should be sufficient in updating the website. Minimal administrative costs. And then TBD, implementation strategy. This is that implementation. How do we actually create a strategy around implementing and coordinating work with our stakeholders, as well as TBD, the equity framework, assisting the SEEK to go through that process of developing the equity framework that we can incorporate as a foundation in all of this work, as well as our giving recommendations to our stakeholders. So that I just threw a lot out at you and talked a lot, so apologies, but I would love it if anyone has any feedback on what has been presented, any comments on the report that Hatch Form, and maybe Hatch Form, I don't know if Sean is on.
Yes, Sean
Oh.
is right.
Okay, great. I
just
see his
joined,
screen.
yeah.
Hi,
Good morning,
Sean.
everybody.
Great to see you. We just did an overview of our work plan based off of your recommendations, and great work. And so I'd love to, if you have questions for Sean, anything related to this, what did we get wrong? What do we need to improve? Are we on track? Love to open it up for the group. I probably put everybody to sleep this morning talking so much. And I can, I'm gonna have to unshare my screen, but I can share it again because I can't see if anyone's raising their hand. All right, Steve, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you. So just a couple of comments and maybe a question or two. First of all, a lot of really good work. I mean, I really mean it when I say applaud you and the team. I mean, because I remember the last time there's just so much in that plan. I think that was maybe a theme, right? Of the advisory committee and the staff was like, God, we got to get our arms around this. I mean, how do we move it forward in an organized, systematic fashion? And I think you've made a lot of, I really mean it, a lot of really good progress in doing that. I'm impressed. And I think it's just going to be a lot easier having, you know, these really several different frameworks in place. So I want to mention that. I had a question just in terms of, so Hatch Form, how long is Hatch Form engaged for? I mean, are they going to be an ongoing partner, or is their work, I mean, done? Essentially, how long are they with us for?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Their contract ended June 30th. And that brings up looking at the fiscal year of 2023 and identifying where we would want to bring on contractors and what are those amounts, and do we have to go out for RFP? What is the scope of work? What is a good budget that we have? But long story short, Hatchform is not currently on contract.
Okay, I appreciate that. And they've been their work looks like it's really well done. And so, I mean, I think you're aware of this, but you've mentioned like, okay, the committee members, people on the phone, we're all busy. It's hard, another task force, Well, it's the same thing for you and staff too. I mean, you got a whole bunch of things you need to do, and I think it's probably going to be, and there's so much here. It's so important, a lot of different priorities in a whole bunch of different areas to have somebody, on contract with a partner that can assist you to do this. And so I know I would be supportive of that. This is so important and there's so much at stake here. You have somebody that's, well, you need to go out to contract, I guess, but somebody is very familiar, help set up this framework, I think would be very important to our success, in terms of the implementation, the tracking of how well have we done versus, our plan. So the only other point I had, sorry, was, there's a lot of work, but there's just so much here. I still see at some point, maybe I'm missing it and I just kind of read what you'd provided us. Maybe there's going to be a need to maybe prioritize the priorities, so to speak, because there's so many different recommendations there. And maybe it's in there and I missed it, but I can see that being a need, but a lot of really good work's gone in. So thanks, good stuff.
Steve, thank you so much for those comments. You hit on one that I think just is worth underscoring that this work is very huge, and how do we bite off manageable pieces of it? And again, I have to echo that the work and help that Sean and his team were able to put forward was really helpful to get this framework together. You mentioned prioritizing the priorities, and that's called out in Sean's plan. This is really just a quick work plan that we put together, but that would come up in that third phase as this group is reviewing the report card. We're gathering feedback. And that's something that Felicia is going to go into right after this agenda item, is this report card that we've done started this assessment work. What's relevant now that, within that strategic plan? What have we started? What do we need to, what can we it's not going to happen due to whatever type of reasons, but I'm glad you brought that up, because that's definitely a part of this, collecting it, assessing it, and then evaluating what's relevant and what do we need to add that's more pertinent.
Thank you.
And then Elaine Perea.
Hi, Johanna. Nice to see you, and echo Steve's comments about how impressed I am with the volume of work that you all have accomplished. It's been that report is huge, and figuring out steps forward from it is a major accomplishment. Just like Steve said, prioritizing the priorities, I was wondering if we might also think about that in terms of stakeholders. I think you are, there is no way you are going to hear from every single person who will later and never hear again, "You didn't ask me." There are just too many people in New Mexico. Somebody is going to say that to you, no matter how much you do stakeholder engagement. And so just like we will need to think through prioritizing the priorities, I think we may need to prioritize stakeholders, and that's a sensitive issue, especially as we're thinking through diversifying the economy, because the people that you want to talk to may be people who aren't the biggest players, but if you ignore the big players while trying to think about the people who want to be big players, you're gonna have some issues as well. So I don't really have an answer, but I think that it's probably worth some strategizing as you move into that stakeholder engagement phase, to not just hear the loudest voices in the room, but actually to build a strategy and a template and do some really critical sorts of evaluation of who it is you want to speak to, and when you've got enough. you mentioned tribal voice, and there are lots of ways to get to tribal voice. And figuring out when you've gotten enough tribal voice, and maybe there's other marginalized groups that you haven't heard from, and going out and proactively getting other marginalized groups, so that you've got the balance as you're thinking about economic development. It's such a challenging space to be in, because you're trying really to find the people who are not maybe the major stakeholders right now. So that's all my comment, but I really want to just congratulate you on great work so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. We're just getting started, so we'll take the congratulations, but just one piece of this work. Hopefully we can be worthy of that congratulations down the road at the end of the year. I'm so glad that you brought that up as well, Elaine. That was something that got brought up actually in discussions with the subcontractor CCP that developed the community engagement strategy at the end of that report, and was acknowledged that the second phase of work, that exactly to your point, the strategy around who do we need to hear from would need to be developed. And James is on. I don't know if you want to talk about, if you want to share anything. I know you're giving an update later, but definitely something on the forefront of James' mind and the SEEK's mind as well, to review that strategy and develop it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the comments too, because we are definitely thinking through how to do community engagement in a way that is casting a broad net and getting a solid slice of New Mexico's population and stakeholders. I'll give a little bit more of a report when we move to the SEEK process on this. But I think it's really wonderful to note that there are 8 tribal appointees to the Sustainable Economy Advisory Committee. So tribal engagement is robust, and we'll continue to work on that. But I really appreciated the point that you made that, you know, there are many different constituents in New Mexico beyond our tribal communities.
Thanks, James. I wanted to use this discussion to bring up that I think that I can create a channel through Teams, because we are all of the members of the task force are state agencies. So I can create a working Teams folder to put a lot of these drafts and the information in there. So as a heads up, you'll have access to that on your Teams, and would love to, again, if you have comments on this work plan, please feel free to chime in. And then also, I don't know if we'll be able to meet prior to getting some of these scopes of work nailed down, but definitely we'll get them in front of you at some point, so you can put some eyes on that as well. Does anybody have feedback on the budget items that were identified, or there's those main components? The administrative assistance, kind of going to what Steve had mentioned, the actual plan writing, data compilation, presentation material. Third was that community engagement, the website updates, separate fund. I'll share my screen really quick if anybody has feedback. And I saw Secretary Trujillo, you're off of your call, and no problem. So if anybody, I can't see now that I shared the screen, but feel free to just chime in if you have any feedback. Steve, your hand is up. Do you have another comment or?
I do
in your-
not.
Okay, all right.
That was inferred. My apologies.
And Johanna, this is Yolanda over at Workforce. You know, the part that piques my interest, or the piece that I'm looking at, is that community engagement side as well. We're going to be getting ready to engage again to develop the state plan, and it does have an economic, I mean, it should be aligned with that. So I think it would be really important for us to see if there's ways that we sort of can pull some synergy on that, because I think part of what's missing for us, for sure, is the engagement with communities that are not typically part of that as well, right? Which is really a big piece on the whole equity side of it. And so I just really am interested in how that can be done, and maybe some things that we could do collectively to support that work.
That's
I'm
great.
still trying to
Deputy.
wrap my head around like what those conversations would be like, and what, you know, what would be the focus, but it seems like there is some things that could come out of that would definitely inform Workforce and the development of our plan.
It sounds like it could be getting two birds with one stone too, that if we're working together on that engagement and creating the opportunities for feedback is happening in tandem too. The contractor that gave us the strategy recommendations, they are working on a scope of work to present, so we can fill you in on that. That'll get in front of the whole task force, but making sure that you're in the loop so you can put eyes on it.
And who's the contractor again, or you haven't decided it yet?
Center, well, we haven't decided, but
Okay.
Center for Civic Policy and Justice was the group that worked with Sean's organization as a subcontractor. And that was through James, two
Okay.
connections with SEEK, and worked
Okay.
with him and SEEK.
Yeah, Deputy Secretary, it's James Poviwa, would really welcome working with you on community engagement as DWS develops your plan. And, you know, Center for Civic Policy is actually the reason why this task force exists, in addition to all of the amazing support that Senator Stewart and our legislative champions had, but they have been engaged in this issue since the ETA. So excited to have them also thinking through a community engagement plan.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. Don't see any other comments. So let's move on to item number 6. And that is an update on the work that we've been doing at EDD, first stab at assessing our strategic plan. So I'm going to turn it over to Felicia DePaula and give you a peek into what we've done internally. And as a heads up, we'll be reaching out soon. So take it away, Felicia.
Great, thank you, Joanna. Can you see my screen?
It's really small, at least on mine. You might want to blow it up a little bit.
That help any?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, terrific. Okay, great. So the portion that I've been working on is the action plan, which essentially translates the content of the strategic direction into concrete steps that will be taken by stakeholders in New Mexico's economic development ecosystem in support of the goals of the overall plan. So it describes the specific actions that need to be performed, and it designates lead and supporting organizations responsible for conducting these activities or actions. So at this point, I have worked with our EDD staff to identify our lead goals and see where we're at as far as progress goes. So there's 6 strategies that are listed in the plan, as you can see here on this pivot table, If you want me to go into detail or you have a specific question about what the strategies mean, please feel free to just unmute yourself and I can give better detail as into what each of these mean. So at this point, this just shows, as far as EDD goes, what's in progress, what's not yet started, and what's completed. So as you can see, a lot of these recommendations are still in progress. We aren't expecting that they'll be completed. We're just trying to really gauge where everyone is at. So we started within our staff to get a better idea of what people are aware of, you know, do they need more detail as far as what's expected of them? So as you can see, I mean, a ton aren't started yet. So we're not expecting everyone to be full force into all of these. We just are really trying to gauge where we're at and keep a finger on the pulse so that none of these drop by the side. So I'm going to switch over to a different tab to show you what our documentation looks like. We break it up into strategy, priority, recommendation, and then the timeline. You can see here, collaborative New Mexico modernize New Mexico's ED ecosystem. For instance, the priority is align the efforts of stakeholders in New Mexico's economic development ecosystem. As you can see, there are different leads in each under each recommendation. So sometimes we'll have a support lead of DWS or HED or tribal governments. And if we're unable to answer some of these questions, we'll reach out to those support leads, to those support systems within the recommendation to see if maybe there's some type of progress that's being made that we're not aware of on our end. So that is basically where we are at and what we're doing. Now, we've reached out to our deputy secretary and EDD staff to figure out who would be the best contact for some of these leads and supports, because now we'll start moving into the realms of everyone on the task force, HED, GSD, MNERD, to see where they're at on some of these recommendations. So I think we'd like to take the time, if not during this meeting, to maybe email me if you have someone that would be a best point of contact within your agency to identify some of these recommendations so that we can get moving on working with outside agencies. So if anybody has questions, feel free to ask. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can dive deeper into this conversation if you'd like.
I love your tool, Felicia. That's awesome. You're giving me, that was great. Great project management on that. I love it. So gave me some thoughts on what we need to be doing at our side so that we can get our things documented like that. That was really awesome.
Thank you. I can't take full credit. Our economist came in here and schooled me in 20 minutes and said, do it this way. And it was like, all right.
That is a great, now that was excellent.
Thank you.
I'm curious about your tab that you have with DWS because I want to know.
Yeah.
But I think you and I can have a conversation offline on that. I mean, and we've been in conversation, obviously, with some activities that we're doing jointly, but definitely, I think it would be helpful for us to, you know, on a one-on-one, just sort of know what you have in my tab and what's, you know, make sure that we're sort of living up to that as well.
Absolutely. And you can find this on our website within the 200-page plan. It'll show you all of your recommendations within there if you want to cheat before I reach out to you.
Okay.
And I can send that to you.
You know, I wanted to add something too that I think got brought up, but this work really is the initial assessment. It's not by any means, this got brought up on the last call, directives. Even within our team, a very small portion were even aware that they were identified as a lead. So it's to enable us to figure out what's still on the table, what doesn't make sense. These were basic recommendations that were created essentially from a consultant that gathered feedback, but how do we make this our own? And this is the first step to just check in with that. So I just want to be really clear about that talking point.
Johanna, so I guess I'm sorry, I just had a couple urgent matters this morning during this meeting. So what's the process then? Is Felicia going to send this out to us so we could review it? and add anything additional, or is it that, you know, Felicia is going to be the person entering the data? You know, I don't know if you like want a bunch of people in there in the document. So like if that's why, you know, we're supposed to let Felicia know who the contact person is, but I just wanted to get a sense of like the next steps and then also the timeline. So what are you looking for in terms of setting this up? And it sounds to me like Johanna said this is the initial putting this out there, but I would expect you want us to do an initial look and provide feedback. And then it seems to me that this will be like a living document of sorts that we continue to update as we move along, sort of like a tracker. But I just had those kind of questions that if you guys could provide some guidance, I'd really appreciate it.
Thanks, Secretary. I hope everything's okay with the urgent matters. You asked about the deployment of the work that Felicia and EDD are working on. And so, Felicia, do you want to add kind of how you're engaging our stakeholders
Sure.
at this point?
Yeah, no problem. So Secretary Trujillo, the way it worked with EDD was we went through and figured out who would be the lead for each recommendation because there were so many for EDD. But what I think would work best for outside agencies is maybe you can give us a point of contact if it's not yourself, who may be able to sit down with me over the phone and chat for 30 minutes to an hour at most. A lot of you don't have a ton of recommendations under each tab, so I can't foresee it taking longer than 30 minutes. That is with the exception of DWS and ATD. I think they have quite a few more recommendations under the strategies. So if you can give us an individual to reach out to, we'll reach out to them directly and set up that phone call. I'll be the only one in here really entering information. We're trying that out for this first go around. If there will be an easier process in the future, we're totally open to ideas. But as of right now, that's what we'll do, is just have a brief conversation, figure out where we're at, take some notes, and in that conversation, you can tell us, this doesn't seem to reflect the work we're doing. I recommend rewording the recommendation this way to better reflect our work or the goals that we're trying to accomplish. So this go around, just really open to feedback and gauging where we're at in the process if we've started at this point.
And we
Great.
can put this, we'll put this work plan in the Teams too, so you can see it, you can access it. And then I was going to add that second question that you asked, Secretary, where how does this fit into the larger work? And this initial assessment will get the compilation after we've completed it, and that'll be in front of this task force by at the next meeting. And then that's our tool to be able to look at, be able to identify what are their priorities, what are the recommendations as we start the phase where we're collecting feedback and edits on the plan. What do we need to edit? What do we need to change? And so once we have the information and we're in the information collection phase, we can get that from all of you and have more of an engagement and discussion as we're updating the plan too.
Great, thanks. And Felicia, I put in the chat who to contact. It'll be a meeting with me, and if you work with Aurora to set that up, that would be fantastic. Appreciate
Perfect.
it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Felicia. Thanks for the
Great, thank you.
comments, Deputy and Secretary. We'll move on. I don't see any other hands or comments. So we'll move on to item number 7 on the agenda, and that is SEEK, Sustainable Economy Advisory Committee. We've got Vice Chair James Powiwa on, chair of that committee. So James, turning it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My apologies for not being on camera. My internet has been unstable. And just a quick update on the Sustainable Economy Advisory Committee. Like you, we are reviewing Hatch Forum's recommendations and also reviewing the Center for Civic Policy's recommendation on community engagement. Folks, our committee members will be submitting their comments over the next couple of weeks in alignment with EDD's process of reviewing as well. Some of the things that I think the committee has been in discussion around have to do with capacity levels for the volunteer committee. And, you know, Sean was able to identify varying levels of capacity among our committee members, which is both exciting to know that there are some committee members with quite a bit of capacity and others who have less. And I think moving forward, as Johanna had mentioned, as Chair Johanna had mentioned in her review of the recommendations, is that SEEK in particular will need support to be able to fulfill its duties. And those supports, I think, come in the form of both working with a contractor to do community engagement, but also to get the nitty-gritty of the committee's activities done. In addition to those recommendations and those capacity identifications, we'll also be working to establish equity principles to provide as a recommendation to the SET Force. We've talked about this in the past, but similar to the governor's climate change task force, who did develop equity principles and adopt them, the Sustainable Advisory Committee would like to do the same. And the contractor, we hope, that does community engagement may also be able to support on vetting those principles. And I think that's our update for now. Johanna, in the interest of time, I'll end.
Thanks, James. Anybody have any questions or points to bring up? Not seeing anything. All right, thank you so much, James. And as a reminder, your next meeting is next month. Do we have a date? If you want to put the date in the chat for
Yeah,
folks.
absolutely. I will put it in the chat. It is the fourth Monday of every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. So that actually is this coming Tuesday.
Okay, great. Okay, next item, item number 8, discussion task force member updates. Anyone on the task force, if you have items you want to bring up for our information, questions, this is your platform to bring it up in time. Now I'm gonna jump in there really quick. I put earlier a link to our wildfire business assistant grants in the chat, and that's something that we've been dealing with at EDD. We announced Monday. It feels like a month ago. We announced the grants available to businesses that have been impacted by wildfire, and I put the link in the chat.
I guess I just will say that we do have a small project that we're working on right now that impacts our rural and frontier communities. So we set aside some funds. It's about $800,000. We're assisting local municipalities with law enforcement recruitment and retention. So the goal here is to work with those smaller municipalities to identify candidates or cadets that we can also support through the training, through the law enforcement training. And so we set aside that fund. If you've got any small communities that, you know, are reaching out to you on that end and have some questions about how they can access that, the best way for them to reach out to that is they can actually just send even a direct email to me, and I'll make sure that we get it linked. We're running it out of the state office and not through the local boards because it's a separate pot of funds. But this is really critical for our smaller communities where, you know, equity, let's talk about an equity issue. They really struggle in maintaining and hiring and finding law enforcement officers and sustaining them.
Deputy, is there a link or someplace that we could point people to for information or? And you're on mute.
We have not, I mean, we've literally
Okay.
are like building the plane as we're
Okay,
flying it. So we don't really have a link out. We're going to be meeting with the Municipal League pretty soon here so that we can do that. We have a presentation coming up with them. And once we complete that, we could do that. But we're literally handling it through kind of word of mouth at this point because it's so targeted and so small. We have enough funds probably to cover about 80 cadets. And we're really targeting those small rural communities.
great. Thank you for that update. And I see Deputy Trujillo is on and raising your hand.
Yes. And I'm sorry, I joined a couple of minutes late. I was coming in from another meeting, so you may have already answered this. But regarding the small grants, I actually got an email from the New Mexico Forest and Watershed Institute at New Mexico Highlands. And they were actually reaching out because they're saying that they have a lot of access right now to grants, right, from state grants, federal grants, but that they're having a really hard time connecting to the people who need it most, right? So I thought I heard you say something about having like technical resources for folks who need to fill out those grants. Can you say more about that so I can hopefully direct these folks to that resource if they need it?
Sure. Thanks for asking that question. Exactly. Underscoring that we've heard the same thing. At this point, Deputy, folks can call. I'll put the information in the chat. In fact, let's Felicia, we can send out an email to the group and put all the information there with the phone number, etc. Webinar. But right now, folks can call our main line, and then we're connecting them with our regional reps that are providing that technical assistance to the businesses that need it. We have a webinar that's available, and then we'll walk people through the application. Also, we have gotten a few requests about folks needing to mail in information, so we would be more than open to working with folks that need to access the application that way too. But that's it right now. But our regional reps are in the respected regions, and so perhaps they're available to meet directly with folks if needed.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll look for that email.
Okay. Okay, I am not seeing any more hands being raised. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to agenda item number 9, and that's public comments. I know we've got a few folks from the public on. If anyone wants to raise their hand and be recognized to say anything. Okay, not seeing any hands being raised. I do want to take a moment to say that we will be sending out calendar invites for the next 3 meetings. And so as of right now, that is the 3rd Wednesday of every month. So our next meeting would be October 19th. In December, it would be December 14th. So we'll send those out hopefully today, along with the email that provides the website and information about where folks can go for information about the wildfire business assistance grants. Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Steve Verick, so moved.
Thanks, Steve. Is there a second?
James Koviwa, second.
Thanks, James. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you so much for your time. I feel like this was a great meeting. We will get that Teams channel set up So hopefully that can provide you with some information in live time with some of those documents that were brought up today. Thank you so much. Hope all's well. Please reach out if EDD can be of any assistance, and we will see you soon. Thank you. Take care.
Great progress.